Canada has suddenly been thrust into the center of the U.S.-China trade war and allegations that China is using its companies to spy on other countries. The U.S. asked Canada to detain and extradite chief financial officer of China's biggest telecom company, Huawei, because of an alleged violation of the Iran sanctions. This was massive. That's because Meng Wanzhou is no ordinary business person. She's also the daughter of the founder of Huawei. Means she's a national hero in China. Not only that, Canada's already under pressure to stop Huawei from having anything to do with Canada's next generation of wireless technology. It's called 5G. Australia, New Zealand, and the U.S. have already banned Huawei from being part of that. Should Canada be doing business with Huawei? To find out, I'm joined now by Dick Fadden, Canada's former head of CSIS, that's the spy agency, and the former national security advisor, both to Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau. And I'm also joined by John Manley, the former, there's a lot of titles, Foreign Affairs Minister, Industry Minister, and Finance Minister. Gentlemen, great to have you on the program.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Let's Dick, start with the espionage allegations and work backwards. Should, just off the top, because this raised these concerns, should Canada follow suit with Australia, New Zealand, and the U.S. and ban Huawei from having anything to do with the next generation of wireless, the 5G network?
Well, I think Canada should, but let me take a step backwards. I think it's beyond reasonable debate. All Western countries recognize that China has a different approach to acquiring intelligence and information abroad. It's what we call spying. So there is an issue there with China generally. There's an issue with large Chinese corporations who have real links with the Chinese government. So I would say that our current approach, which is to say that we can establish conditions, monitor and review, is not good enough. It may be true today, but if we do only this and impose conditions, it seems to me that over time we're giving the Chinese security agencies an opportunity to work around our defenses. And once Huawei is in, we'll never get them out.
And as people who work with Huawei have said, they said, oh, we've been in Canada for years. We work with lots of different companies. But they say we're not a state-owned enterprise, so you can't confuse us with that. But can we? What are the rules in China regarding any massive company like Huawei?
Well, it's not just any massive company. There's a Chinese law which says unambiguously any Chinese citizen and any Chinese company must respond to requests by Chinese security agencies. Now, am I suggesting that every company and every Chinese person on the planet is acting on behalf of the Chinese security companies? No, I'm not. Huawei, on the other hand, is operating in what the Chinese call a strategic sector. It's a real interest of the Chinese state. I would be very surprised. In fact, I believe they're acting as an agent of the Chinese state, and we have to be careful as a consequence.
The politics of this, John, and this is something that goes back into your field, when Canada's asked to extradite someone of that importance to the United States in the midst of heavy-duty tensions between China and the U.S., what are the geopolitical consequences? I'm thinking Canada's caught in the middle here and is about to get nastily sideswiped.
There are some things that we don't know in the sequence of events. The Prime Minister has stated that he was informed. Not quite clear to me when he actually was informed. If you strictly go by our international obligations, we do have an extradition treaty with the United States. The request was made in the proper form, and therefore we have an obligation to respond as we have done.
That's right.
It's possible that this would have been a good case for what you might call creative incompetence. This woman was not residing in Canada. She was simply transferring flights in Canada, and we might have just missed her.
Wow.
And
just to avoid being caught in the middle? Is that
let me tell you, being caught in the middle, this is a big deal. The worry that I have really on this, Evan, is Canada has found over the last 2 years that we have an unreliable economic partner south of the border. We've never been, in my view, as alone in the world as we are now. And we need China entirely for economic reasons. China is the way we validate the policy of diversification of our trade and economic interests. There's no other choice. We're not going to diversify with these booming trade routes to Vietnam or Brunei. China is the second largest economy in the world. We need to have our own China policy driven by our own national interests. And unfortunately, we've got ourselves caught in a situation where our China policy is being very much fashioned by some hardliners in Washington. It's not good for us.
I agree with what John's saying, that we need a China policy, but we were chatting before the event here, and I was saying that I can remember sitting through the efforts of 3 governments to come up with a China policy. It's very, very difficult for us to do, because I think we need a commercial and trade element, we need a security element, and we need a strategic political element. And given the environment that John is describing, that's almost impossible. So in the context of this Meng issue, I think it's important to say to your viewers, this is a mechanical process. I mean, John implied it. There was a request, a Department of Justice official did some forms, an arrest took place. Ministers and senior officials have nothing to do with this.
It's just the extradition treaty,
yeah,
I
we're
understand
caught
that.
by the rule of law and the fact that we have an independent judiciary.
Yeah, but politics doesn't care about the details sometimes. What if you were the national security advisor, knowing what's going on, what would you say now?
I would say we would have to be as clear as we possibly can that we have an independent judiciary, that governments have nothing to do with this. Get Ms. Meng to hire the best lawyers she can and ensure that every courtesy that the law allows is extended. Call in officials from the Chinese government and explain this to them until your back teeth float. But there is nothing that can practically be done once it's before the courts.
It is.
Okay, yeah, so what's the warning fight? Because the market's melted down on this happening, and everybody sees this as the beginning, the little powder keg that's lit that may derail any kind of détente between the Chinese and the U.S. on the economic front.
Well, the markets are right to worry about it. We don't know what the end game is for the United States here. But personally, I don't understand why they would want this person in their jurisdiction and before their courts. It's horrendously difficult to see how they work their way out of this and what exactly they want from it. This happened the same day as the President of the United States and the President of China were meeting.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And ostensibly, I mean, the markets rallied after that because President Trump came out and said, well, we've solved it. We've solved it. He must have known what was happening in Canada at that moment in time. It was at his government's request. And you've just got to wonder whether anybody has a plan.
Does anyone really know what's going on in the White House? That's an interesting question. No one does.
There are books being written about that.
I'm trying to figure that out. But listen, very consequential. John Manley, Dick Fadden, great to have both of you on the program.